I'm Said, as Maxim has said. So this work has been going for a while now. It's part of the CRC for water sensitive cities, and I have been working with Maxim here and Abby, who is not here, and then also directly supported by Dave and James and Tammy and the whole CRC crew. So this is one of the case study that we are, okay, thank you. So this is one of the case study that we have been running as part of our CRC project. So this is more or less about how we can restore urban land uses, and especially when there are infrastructures which are not being currently used, and how we can get people's preferences or social preferences for different restoration options. And so obviously, coming from an environmental economics background, we have thought of applying some non-market valuation tools. So there's the results I'm going to show you about that. I have to warn you first, this because I'm going to give the same presentation next week to the stakeholders, so some of the slides are a bit like maybe too detailed for you, but please bear with me so that I can go through them. So in terms of the particular case study area we're talking about, this is based in Melbourne, and Melbourne Water is the main custodian of this pipeline project, and this is a state heritage listed site, and they are interested to know if they convert it into a public open space type infrastructure, then what are the additional benefits or the social benefits that potential project could generate. So I want to show you a little bit video first so that you can get a background. Yep. Okay. Okay, you see there is a genuine policy drive to convert this into this estate heritage listed site, but which are not currently being used into a more multifunctional type of system. There are some limitations in terms of what they can do. For example, they cannot excavate it completely because it is heritage listing. But given the custodian is Melbourne Water, they're thinking how they can also serve some of the livability program purpose through conversion of this site. So obviously we need to know how different people would respond to these different proposals, and they have been doing some community consultations even before us getting involved with this, and they are asking for community feedback, etc. But when we joined to the team, then we said that how about there might be a more rigorous approach and through environmental economics, and how about we apply that? And especially if you are interested in developing a business case for different restoration options, then you need to quantify these social benefits somehow. And but as we know that there is no current existing market for this kind of services we could potentially get from public open space type of projects, so we have to apply some non-market valuation techniques. So they were convinced, and they are very happy to work with us on this as part of the CRC. So we did two particular tasks in this project. One is that we conducted a hedonic analysis on the Brooklyn Federation Trail Park. So that is a small scale, small site which was being converted already in 2012 by a local community group into a parkland type project. So there was enough observations in terms for us to apply this hedonic analysis technique. Whereas in the other sites, the Williams Landing site is very recent, and so we did not have many observations on that, and the rest there was no activity done, so we had to go for another technique, which is we have called choice experiments. In terms of the local, what the spread of our choice experiment survey, we confined ourselves to within 5 kilometer zone, because we thought that given that this is a local site and it's not being actually used that much outside of the local community, we first need to know how the local people would benefit from this renovation or restoration. So I'm going to take you through all of these, both of the component. So probably you already know what is hedonic pricing about. Can I have a show of hand who does not know what is hedonic pricing? Great, everybody knows. Emma? Clear to you? So with hedonic pricing, we get house price data as well as house characteristics. We also get location characteristics, for example, like how far or close they are to a particular project area or a site or a public open space, and through our regression models, and then we can get what is the impact of a certain property or certain site. So in our particular case, we are interested in what is the impact of this Brooklyn renovation project. Okay. So this is how the Brooklyn parks look like in 2010 and 2017. So the point where you have to look at, so is here. You see that this is the pipeline site, and then this is where they have planted some trees, and trees started to grow, and we could see some visible impact. And if we go a bit more close, this is how the restoration project took place in that site. And you could ask that, okay, where is actually the pipeline itself? That's buried under soil here, and so they planted trees on the top of it. So they are allowed to do that, but they are not allowed to excavate it and to completely convert into something else. So as long as it's restored at some form or preserved, then it's fine. So there are some flexibility in terms of what they can do. So we collected house sale price data on this from a commercial company, and there are around 1,700 observation of sales from 2001 to 2018, and 67% of the sales data was houses, and the rest were units. So you can see the distribution in terms of blue and green dots of houses and units. So we tried different models, especially we are interested to know that how far we can go in terms of the impact of this public open space. So in the hedonic analysis, and Maxine can tell you more, is mainly we capture the amenity benefit, so which is usually like what people can directly experience. So in that sense, distance is quite important, because if you live far, then you may not experience the benefit of the visual benefit of that project. So our testing through different models has told us that we can identify the impact within more or less 50 meters. If we go to 100 meters or beyond, then we do not see any impact. So it is if there is any impact, that's very localized impact in terms of amenity benefit. So it's only to adjacent houses. So in terms of the regression models, I'm going to show you that we are looking at the impact of those houses or units within the 50-meter area, and we are comparing with the rest of the houses who are within 1 kilometer buffer. Yeah, so that's our comparison groups, and this is our target group. So these are the regression results. So we tried, as I mentioned, various models, but here we have presented only two just to show you the robustness. Our main interest here is these two dots, or basically the red dot here, because this is the random intercept model, which we think is more robust given our data condition. And what we can see is that within 50 meters from Brooklyn Park, after construction, which means that after 2012, we see around a 5% uplift in the property price. And the confidence interval is between 0.66% to 10.3%. So on the other hand, you can see that with the linear model, we see similar level of impact, except that it is not statistically significant. So it tells us that there are two things. One is that maybe we don't have enough data, or on the other hand, it is possible, more or less, maybe we don't have enough data to statistically get the results, or whether it's significant or not, but in terms of the effect, it's more or less consistent between the models. So that gives us some confidence in terms of which number we should pick and whether we should use these red dots or not. So in the analysis I'm going to show you following on that, I'm going to use these red dots here as well as the confidence intervals from this model. Ask us later if you want to know a bit more about this, how we have generated these results. So a 5% uplift, and if we now extrapolate or try to calculate a total value, there are around 200 properties within 50 meters of this Brooklyn Park. The median house price is around $500,000, was in 2018. So 5% uplift gives us around $25,000 uplift because of this construction of this public open space, and the total aggregate benefit is around $5 million one-off. So that's the result and the summary results from the hedonic analysis. But as you can imagine, that this is not all, because they only just planted a few trees, but they could do a lot more in terms of what kind of services they could provide to the local community. And so you are interested in that too, but there was no existing project that we could take data from. So that's why we went to the choice experiment results analysis. Again, a show of hand, how many does not know about choice experiments?
Who does know all those people?
Okay, anybody who's not familiar with choice experiment method? Okay. Yes, yeah. Thank you, but that was not the question. Okay, so as probably you all know that this is either Abby or Michael is making the choice, not both of them at the same time, but they have a choice of choice set A and B, and they have to, depending on the criteria or characteristics of this particular project. For example, in choice set A, we have a river, which is very brownish color, not so good, and only one or two dolphins. Whereas with choice set B, we have lots of trees, blue water, lots of dolphins, they're happy, but government has to spend a lot more as well at the same time, which means that we, as the general public, we have to pay a lot more if we want to achieve that outcome. Given your financial circumstances, given your conditions, all these things, which one you would pick, which one you would want government to implement. So there are two individuals here, they might go for different choices. Maybe the red tick was Maxim's choice, not either of them. But anyway, so that's the basic idea with a choice experiment. So as I mentioned, this is a long process. We started in 2017. We went through all the standard procedure of a choice experiment setup, going from initial discussion with the experts, then community consultations through focus groups in 2018, then more consultations. There was a roadblock at one point due to political reasons. Then finally we got approval in 2019 to run our survey. We ran it in March and April, right at the time when the project is actually going to finish. And so more or less we have the data now, and we have all the, more or less the analysis is done as well. So we're busy, very busy in writing the report. So through this process, through this expert consultation and community consultation, we have identified 6 main features that probably would be feasible or would be more interesting to implement in this kind of restoration projects. So starting with level of vegetation, general park facilities, paths and tracks, exercise facilities, rainwater management, and local crossing. I'll take you through each one by one. So in terms of vegetation, so as you know, in the choice experiment, we are more not only interested in the value of a particular feature, we are also interested in the value of a particular level within a feature. So that's the attributes. So within the vegetation cover, we had these 4 levels. So this is the current condition. There's most of the area, the site is bare soil and grass. Then it's possible to have some grass only, and then grass, some trees, and then grass and many trees. So those are the levels we considered. Then general park facilities, at the moment nothing is existing. Then we could have a minimum, which is seats, and then we could go for seats and drink fountains, then seats, drink fountains, and barbecue spots and facilities. And then the high level is seats, drink fountains, barbecue spots, as well as toilets. You could wonder about that, where these people would go, like if we only implement barbecue spots but no toilet. But that's something was considered as a potential level Melbourne Water and others could consider, but so it came from them. Paths and tracks, that's the Federal Trail that runs along the pipeline, and that is also not in a very good state, good condition, and it's possible to renovate that. So at the moment there is no path renovation plan, and the current situation is that it's old asphalt shared by pedestrians and cyclists. So it's sometimes quite a bit tricky for the local people, especially when they are taking a walk. Then the potential improvements are renovated shared path, and then the final one is the renovated separate path. So we have cyclists and walkers, they have a separate path for each of them. We are also interested in the rainwater management. The current facility is that there is no facility in terms of pollution removal capacity, and there could be possible to implement or install some pollution removal capacity at some spots within this pipeline. So it could be that clear rainwater is removed to pollutants before they are entered into the river or creek, and the higher level would be that we remove pollutants and then we reuse to irrigate local vegetation. So that would be the final level. Then there is exercise facilities that could be simply exercise equipment. It could be playground. It could be both exercise equipment and playground. And the high level could be exercise equipment, playground, and also a skate park. So that's, again, is possible to implement if there is enough demand and enough support. There's also local crossings. So at the moment, at most of the places, it's actually either fenced off or there is an actual connection. So you cannot go from one side to the other side of the pipeline. Okay, so and the experts and our local stakeholders, councils, they felt that this could, if we could provide this connection, that could potentially improve the livability and flexibility of the local community. So we considered several options. One is the footbridge, which goes over the pipeline, and we specified like at what interval we'll implement this. So that's 1 kilometer along the reserve. We could say that it's narrow crossing where we'll fill some space and they could actually walk on the ground and they could cross the pipeline. And then there is a wider crossing, which is basically the field area is more wider, and you have more area to cross. That's the local crossing. So that's our different attributes that we considered as part of our choice experiment. So we said that was one of the issue with the political issue that they are actually not going to do it immediately. But so we need to emphasize that it is a hypothetical scenario, and we say that imagine that you have the government is going to implement it without naming any particular agency, and which for that particular MOS reserve which is closest to your house, Because if we say it's far, then they might say that, why do I care? I'm not going to go there anyway. So that's why we have to emphasize that it is closest to your house, and then all the choices you make, depending on this hypothetical situation. It's a long, busy slide, but this is the choice scenario. One of the choice scenarios they are shown. So with the current option, there is nothing there. You can see, and also there is no additional one-time charge. With option 2 and 3, there are lots of other things happening, but there is also money involved, and that is just one-time charge, and that being added to your next water bill or drainage charge that comes annually. So that's how we presented the choice scenarios to them, and each respondent received or seen many scenarios, 8 scenarios actually, to be specific. So as I mentioned before, we are interested in the people who are living within 5 kilometers, and that gave us a little bit of pain because we hired the research company, but they had to have the panel within that particular location, and that was not easy. We had to go through several companies because they said that they could not provide our required sample. And then the one that we hired at the end, they had to secure help from another company to meet our requirement. But anyways, at the end we got the data, and so this red area is where our respondents are coming from. And this is where actually there is no local residents, so this is more industry. This is more or less distributed as we were hoping for, and it's good. In terms of matching the profile of the existing community, we asked the company to match in terms of male and female distribution, and then also in terms of income distribution. So income distribution, at least it resembles quite nicely. So this city of Wyndham is one of the council area through where the pipeline has gone, and that's from where our sample has come, many, not all of them. But what you could see is that more or less following the pattern of the overall as well as the greater Melbourne of our sample. So the main survey was done in May 2019, and so in total we got 624 completed surveys, including 106 pilots. And in the analysis that we only report results from the 518 respondents completed survey. So the things that I'm going to show you later, they are all from this 518. So in particularly with the choice experiment part, we are interested to know how much people are willing to pay for different MOS improvement features, and whether that would vary by their exposure to the MOS as well as by their socio-demographic condition. So that's our main research objectives. So I will skip through this. If you are interested, we can talk later, but this is basically to show Melbourne Water and other stakeholders that we have got a good representation, and well, I'll talk a little bit anyway. So there are, this is the socio-demographic characteristics and age group and etc. There is nothing unusual. That's what basically we have to show to them. I can come back to this later. Employment status, income group, as I have shown before, experience. So that's probably is more interesting, where many people actually don't know that how far they live from the MOS, around 28%, but around 48% live far, like from 1 kilometer, and the rest live within 1 kilometer of the MOS site. We also asked them about whether they use MOS for some regions or maybe other parks and reserves. 27% said yes, they use both MOS and other parks and reserves as well for various purposes. And then there is a 20% who said actually they don't use neither MOS nor the other reserves or parks. So that is quite interesting, because that's something we, as one of the research questions, we wanted to know, and whether it has an influence or not. MOS, and this is a little bit breakdown of how often do we use the parks, how often do we use the MOS reserves, daily, weekly, monthly, etc. This is a long, busy slide again, but they're basically trying to understand their general agreement with the idea that the MOS should be preserved, or different groups have different responsibilities in terms of maintaining or restoring this site. So I'll take you through some of these. For example, here it said general public should volunteer to maintain or restore the MOS Reserve Federation Trail on their own. And this is where you see that around 25% actually agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. And then they are also think there is important part of the local landscape that has got higher agreement. And then we have this, whether it's personally important to me as a recreational site, personally important to me as a heritage site. There is around, this line is around 25%. There are 25% people who actually think it's very important to maintain this MOS site or restore even. Yeah. So, which is not bad. And now the attitudes related to the survey. So this is an interesting question. Even though respondent target group was the local community within 5 kilometers. So what we asked them, like, who should actually pay for the maintaining or restoring this MOS? So around 47% said that all residents of Melbourne, 27% said those who actually use this MOS and they should pay for that, and 26% said no one, but they did not specify who actually should pay them. But that's an interesting question. And in terms of survey question itself, whether we asked them that whether they considered their financial circumstances, 73% said yes, they did consider the financial circumstances. That's pretty good indication of the quality of the responses. And then we had a question of like how certain you are about when you're making the choices. And mean response is 7.24, which is again pretty good to have that kind of certainty with the responses. And then when I asked them, like, okay, how likely this survey results is going to influence the government policy, there is less confidence in terms of distribution, so around 6.1%, 6.1 average score, which is not bad, but it indicates general uncertainty. So the main result, willingness to pay, again tested various models, ended up selecting a scale-adjusted latent class model because we are interested in how the socio-demographic factors could influence their willingness to pay. And based on information criteria, I selected two scale class, two preference class model. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those results. So there is one group who are quite certain about their choices, and so they're pretty good responses. And in terms of, so the scale factor tells us that whether there is any particular distinction between respondents in terms of how they have made the choices, not what choices they have made. Okay, so there is how the variance is and etc. So what we can tell us that it's possible to explain to some extent how they have made the choices with their response to the question of the certainty. That the more certain they are likely to belong to a particular class, scale class. So in this case, it's the scale class 1. So I'm taking the scale class 2 as the reference category here. So that tells us that it is internally consistent to some extent, depending on their choices made to the choice sets and the response to their debriefing questions. So this is a busy slide. So we have around 86% who are within class 1 respondents, and as you can see, all these attributes are statistically significant. Don't read the numbers, I will tell more about this, but what you can see is that they are all statistically significant, but 14% there is almost nothing significant, which means that they do not care, or they do have zero willingness to pay for this kind of project, which is fine. That's what we wanted to know. Okay, and so the result I'm going to show, and well, in a slightly different way, is the same information in a graphical form, but it's telling us that with class 2, it's basically everything is overlapping with zero line. The confidence intervals were almost all the attributes, features except for the bottom 2, which is renovated separate path and renovated shared path, but everything else, including the cost. So we actually cannot calculate the willingness to pay because this is non-significant. Whereas class 1, which is around 86% of our respondents, they are pretty good, and they are all statistically significant, as I've shown before, and we can also see here. So who are likely to belong to this class 1? So that's more interesting, because that's what's telling us their socio-demographic preferences. So what we have seen that both male and female, and there is a third group who is prefer to self-describe, and then there is another group who not like to disclose. So this is in relation to the not likely to disclose. Both male and female, there is no difference, and they are both likely to be in class 1, which belongs to our 86% respondents. Those who are employed, they are less likely to be belonging to class 1. So they do not care, or they do not want to pay anything. Income having less than $2,000, that might be a mistake, per week, maybe month. I have to double check. That's again, those who are with the lower income, they're less likely to belonging to the class 1. Who own the place, renting, this is in relation to those who are living with their parents or living with their friends, not paying for anything. So compared to those group, they are likely to belong to class 1. Interestingly, those who use both MOS and local park, there is no significant difference. On the other hand, those who use either MOS or the local park, they are more likely to belong to class 1, who are willing to pay something. It may indicate that when they are using both MOS and the local park, there is already satisfaction in terms of what the services they could potentially get from these kind of projects. So maybe that's how we could interpret this number, that either MOS or local park, there is still a demand, so they are willing to pay. Obviously, those who consider their own financial circumstances, they're obviously thinking about their own income and capacity, and they are less likely to belong to class 1. And finally, those who said no one, compared to those guys, all residents or only local residents, both of them are belonging to class 1. And then finally, the statements, the agreement that's doesn't playing a big role, but agreed with general public on their own, should be responsible for maintaining and restoring the MOS. So this is a strong agreement or a general agreement that general public should maintain this restoration, but they don't want to pay anything, and which means that they are in the class 2. So in other words, they're less likely to be in class 1. So this is again a internally consistency checking, that it is telling us the right kind of a story, in a sense that okay, the general public should tell, but on the other hand, I personally don't want to pay. That's basically it's telling us. So willingness to pay per household, this is the one-off payment, because we said that it will be added only to once. So what we can see is that people have positive willingness to pay, and the highest is depending on different attributes. So we have for the facilities, general park facilities, people are willing to pay more for seats, drink fountain, barbecues, and toilets. But then you could argue, based on the overlap in confidence interval, whether these 2 points are actually statistically different or not. We haven't tested that yet, but more or less we can say that people with higher levels, people have higher willingness to pay. But here is definitely there is overlap and the exercise facilities, but it is again positive. Grass and some trees and many trees, they are willing to pay. So these numbers are around, so you can see the scale here from, this is around 100. So most of them have around close to $100 per household willingness to pay. And the maximum is here, this is around 220 or 218. And basically nothing is non-significant, they are all positive. This is reporting to the class 1 willingness to pay, that 86%, because we already have established that for class 2, it's actually 0 willingness to pay. So we are not reporting that. So given this information, what kind of projects Melbourne Water should implement? We don't have any cost data yet, so this is just based on estimating the total value of a project. This is not the net benefit. So we picked up whatever the maximum willingness to pay would get, and there is an assumption that we made here that we said that it is possible to linearly aggregate these values. That's an assumption that could be challenged in some circumstances. But what we can get that there are around $1,816 per household willingness to pay to implement a restoration project with these particular type of features. And if we convert into an annualized value, that gives us around $41 per household per year. And that is around half of what they are now paying as part of their drainage charges. So the residents are paying around $90 per year for annual drainage charges, waterway and drainage charges. So that's around half. So in a way, maybe they are thinking that if I'm contributing too much here, then maybe I have less burden on providing support for others. So that's something we were discussing with the local stakeholders. So findings, people have positive willingness to pay, socio-demographic information influence their choices, experience or use experience with local parks have a positive impact in terms of the belonging to different class. Distance to the MOS is does not matter much in our choice experiment setup. Now, bringing things together, total value. So we have two components, hedonic and choice experiments. This is our total site from here, starting from here to here. The red areas are where actually there are houses within 50 meters of this pipeline. So our interest is, can we calculate the total value of a restoration project which would be spread over this whole of pipeline. So in the mesh block, this is within 5 kilometers, and there are around 127,000 dwellings within 5 kilometers, and in the red areas, there are around 700 adjacent dwellings within 50 meters. So what we did was that we took our numbers from both situations, and both are one-off payments, so that's pretty convenient for us. And we did some arithmetics. So we took the number of dwellings. So the surrounding here I have adjusted for, I took off that 14% who had zero willingness to pay. So this number has been adjusted to 86% of the total dwellings within 5 kilometers. And these are our various willingness to pay for different features. And this would be what discussing with you. Like we have two different methods. Which method is capturing which benefit type, and whether there is any potential overlap or double counting or not. So what we did here, if you look at for within adjacent, within 50 meters, definitely they are getting the hedonic benefit. But we have assigned few other benefits as well. For example, like we remember the Brooklyn Park, that was only just trees, nothing else. Okay, so that's why. So we said that there could be seats and drink fountains. So obviously that would be an additional activity. They would get some benefit. We said that, okay, it should be considered for those who are within 50 meters. Similarly, exercise equipment. And then the last one was renovated shared path, because they did not do anything on the path itself. So these are the ones that we considered within 50 meters. And then for the remaining dwellings, between 50 meters to 5 kilometers, we obviously did not include amenity benefit because we already have tested that there is zero. So this is a big number, but what we get is around $104 million as one-off value that would generate potentially. And
you mean that's like a present value of the future stream of benefits? Is that?
Yes, yes. So then we did a little bit of sensitivity analysis where we picked the 95% confidence interval. We picked all the lowest values for this type of benefits and all the highest type of for the 95% confidence interval. This gives us a nice spread of from $60 million to around $143, $44 million worth of benefit. So, and then we can also see the distribution of in terms of different types of houses, adjacent or surrounding. Last slide. So it could potentially generate benefit, potentially very large social benefit. In some senses, these are underestimation or conservative because there is a value in terms of heritage, maintaining the heritage status of this site, and that presumably that value would be applied to the whole of Melbourne, not only those who are living close to the site. So you can argue that maybe those values should be added up. And it's possible that given this larger scale restoration project, it could generate secondary multiplier effect to the local economy, the jobs and etc., which of course we did not consider here. So thank you, and any question?